Okay, so hello and welcome to my top 50 favorite games list. This video series will be covering my top 50 personal favorite games of all time. It'll probably be 5 parts long, and each of these will be covering 10 games most likely. Now it's important to keep in mind these videos will not be like a top 50 most popular games of all time list. They'll be going over my top 50 favorite games, not the top 50 most popular games or anything like that. Okay, so with that out of the way, I think it's time to head into our first game. So, number 50 is Dangerous Waters. I'm sure most of you haven't even heard of that game before. So when you boil it down, Dangerous Waters is a naval warfare simulator at its core. I remember I bought it at the bookstore for $9.99, I believe, somewhere around 2007-ish. When I looked on the back of the box, it looked really cool because you could, like, you know, control submarines and launch torpedoes and stuff like that. I was like, oh wow, this is so cool, I better buy it. The problem with the idea is that the game's quite realistic. You can't just select the target and hit fire on your weapons. You do actually have to use your radar, your sonar, your towed array to sort of triangulate the target and range the target. So I could never figure that out when I was like 8 years old. The funny thing is that I still haven't even beaten the first level of the game, and I think there's 9 or 10 or 11 campaign missions. I haven't even beat the first one yet. So Dangerous Waters is on this list because, as far as I can tell, it's still one of the more realistic submarine warfare simulators. And even though I haven't even beaten the first level of it yet, it is still pretty fun to play and just mess around with. Number 49 is Strike Force Bowling. So you're probably wondering why a bowling game is on this list. And mainly because it's quite a fun bowling game. Compared to other bowling games, like say the bowling game that comes with Wii Sports, it's a lot more fun than that. In Strike Force Bowling, you get to customize the balls that you use. You can pick a piece of marble, a piece of granite, literally just a boulder. I always use the coconut because that was pretty fun. You get to pick which alley you play in. So you can play in a standard bowling alley. I always played on the level where the alley is a bridge going over a moat, going into a castle. So that was always fun. The gameplay mechanics of the game are so easy. Basically, it's just a slider that sets your power level. And if you get on the green ideal spot each time by just pressing A on your gamepad, you'll get a strike every time. So it made you feel like an absolute god because you can get 10 strikes in a row super easily. But that's why Strike Force Bowling is on this list. If you have a chance, I would recommend picking it up. It's pretty fun. Number 48 is Animal Crossing. This is going to be a short and sweet one, but there's just something relaxing about, you know, harvesting fruit from trees, decorating your house, sending mail in-game. My favorite part of the game was always going to Tom Nook's store every day and looking at the different decorations that they have. I once found a GameCube, and I was super excited about that. I always liked the sort of local multiplayer aspect of the game that it had, where you could send decorations and mail and fruit to other players on your save file. So say if you have other family members playing on the same memory card, you could send decorations and money to them, and they could send items back to you. That was always fun because every day I would check my mail and see something that my mom sent me to put in my house. But yeah, I don't really know what else to say about Animal Crossing. All of you have heard about this game before. Being that this is the first Animal Crossing game, it doesn't have as much decorations and customization as, say, New Horizons, the new Animal Crossing game that just came out this year. But it still has more than enough for, you know, months of playtime. Number 47 is Jimmy Neutron vs. Jimmy Negatron. And for those of you who have played this game before, you're already having nightmare flashbacks to the Herminator boss fight with that music playing in the background. So Jimmy Neutron vs. Jimmy Negatron is actually a sequel to the first Jimmy Neutron game, Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius. I had both when I was a kid, but I preferred Jimmy Negatron because the story is a little more interesting. You had a lot cooler weapons, like you got to use a water balloon launcher. You got to use the infamous burp bazooka when you face Herminator. You see this super powerful weapon on your little tech tree throughout the entire game, and you never get to use the burp bazooka. And then finally at the very end of the game when you're facing Herminator, then you actually get to use the burp bazooka. So that was exciting. I just replayed this game a few weeks ago, and I still remember the entire Egyptian level when you have to face the mummy bots and release your parents from their little coffin prison that they got put in by Jimmy Negatron. And one of the puzzles on that level, you have to cross over an abyss covered by false platforms, and some of them fall down when you step on them and some of them stay solid. I still remember the exact path that I needed to take to cross that chasm even 12 years later from the last time I played this game. I played it quite a lot as a kid. This game has aged a bit. The controls aren't quite as fluid as you would want them to be. There's a distinct lag between when you press, say, forward or left or right and when you actually start turning or moving. So that can be sort of irritating if you're trying to platform or jump a gap and you have to press, the spacebar a full second before you get to the edge of whatever ledge you're on, just because it takes so long for them to actually react to your button press. But you get used to it, and it's still a fun game overall. Number 46 is Battlefield 2. So Battlefield 2 was actually my first Battlefield game ever. I probably bought it around 2008, 2009-ish. I must have a few thousand hours in this game because I played it basically every day for years. It was one of the few sort of fake multiplayer games I had as a kid that you could play with bots. So you could have, I believe it was 10 on 10, or it might have been 8 on 8. And I used to do these sort of audio recordings where I used to put my MP3 player down next to my computer speakers and then just talk as I'm playing. So I used to do audio playthroughs rather than video playthroughs. And I played every different mode of Battlefield 2. I used every different class that you could pick. I used a sniper class, the assault class, the special operations, special forces class. And I made, 50 recordings with each class, 50 recordings on each map that you could play on. I played it a lot. I remember Gulf of Oman was actually my favorite level because there was a big crane overlooking the entire level, and you could sit on there and snipe. Even though the sniping in this game is admittedly really not good, it's really laggy. Like, you really have to lead your shot by quite a lot. But even though it was fun, it was always super frustrating to play with bots because they have pinpoint accuracy. Like, they could hit you halfway across the map with their rocket launchers or their sniper rifles, and you can't even see the enemy, and you just see a rocket flying down the road ready to hit directly into your Abrams or your Jeep or whatever. But the AI was also sort of dumb. It liked to group up all of its players on, say, a capture point or on a stronghold where there's a lot of vehicles. So what you could do, you could run in with your special operations class and throw C4 down all over the place and just kill the entire enemy team with one detonation. That was always super fun when you just see bodies flying out the building or flying out of a tank. My favorite vehicle to drive was always the helicopter because you got to use the Gatling gun as well as fire rockets at enemies. But I could never work out how to fly the helicopter when I was a kid because you have to sort of make it hover to shoot the weapons accurately. And I couldn't do that. I would just fly into the side of a building or fly into an oil tank or usually the crane on Gulf of Oman I'll fly right into. Even though this game has aged quite a bit, it's still really fun to play and get those ridiculous multi-kills with C4 or claymores. So that's Battlefield 2, a game that I have thousands of hours in, and a game that I would still recommend picking up if you have a chance. Number 45 is Restaurant Empire. So I remember I bought this game around 2008, and I've got it at Target for $9.99. And it was one of the first management games I ever had. Even to this day, it still has one of the best tutorials that I've ever seen in a game. It goes so much into detail about what each button does, what every value means, and it'll tell you to do something, and the tutorial would wait until you actually did it and then continue on, so you couldn't just skip past it. And when you're 8 years old, that really helps. And it wasn't just a huge tutorial session at the very beginning of the game and that's it. Every single time you unlock a new restaurant or a new piece of equipment, you have an entire tutorial session dedicated to it. And that really helped when you're a young kid playing this game. And like I mentioned, this is one of the first management games I've ever played. And you get to customize everything within your restaurant. You get to customize the floor tiles, the wallpaper, every single item on the menu, what ingredients they all use, every single table, piece of furniture, chairs, paintings, even what the building looked like, if you have a balcony or not, if you have street lights in front of your restaurant. So customizing all of that when you're young is really fun. I used to spend hours in the menus picking each individual dish that my restaurant offered, picking the best ingredients that I could find. And I used to try to level all of them up to a 5-star ranking, which means like it's the best quality that it can be. And that also means that you can charge a ridiculous amount of money for it. Maybe that's why my restaurants never actually succeeded, because everything was overpriced. I remember the mixed casserole pork dish. It was one of the highest rated dishes I had on all of my menus, and it wasn't really overpriced where customers could actually afford buying it. So they would all buy the same thing, the mixed casserole of pork. You would see like 4 plates of it every time a waiter walked out of the kitchen holding a tray. The entire tray would just be mixed casserole of porks. But that's number 45, Restaurant Empire. I actually just installed it on my computer a few days ago, so I'm still playing it right now. And it's still just as fun as I remember it. Go pick it up if you can. Number 44 is Prison Architect. Now, Prison Architect is my kind of game. This is the kind of game that I can play for hours at a time. I absolutely love these types of management games. Introversion Software, the people who made Prison Architect, basically said, let's take this dead Prison Tycoon series and make it 10 times better with a much more unique art style. And I absolutely love the art style of the game. It has this unique cartoonish look that I absolutely love. And the way your staff and the prisoners sort of slide around is kind of funny and really unique. Although my prisons always end up in a riot because I don't build cells very well. Everyone knows that the point of Prison Architect is to sort of build up your prison, build up your cell blocks, build up your canteen, and slowly make more and more revenue. But a large portion of the game, for me at least, is when everything starts to go wrong, especially when a full-blown riot breaks out. You get to turn free fire mode on and just let your armed guards go ham. It's absolutely hilarious. It's really exciting when you have to send your guards in to rescue other staff members and try to save as many prisoners as possible without letting them kill each other. So riots are always fun. But also another feature that I like in Prison Architect is the whole death row system, where actually you get to build a death row in your prison. You're just dying to see that death row prisoner show up in your list of daily arrivals, and you're like, yes, I can take advantage of my death row now. I believe you get $25,000 for each execution, which is quite good and lets you really expand your prison quickly. And I know they just added a escape from your own prison mode recently. That's always interesting because you get to see how well your security and defenses are sort of set up in your prison as a prisoner, from the prisoner's perspective. Basically what you do to escape your own prison is just break into the armory, grab a shotgun, and you're home free at that point. Just kill any guard that walks in. And I know they also added a multiplayer aspect to the game, where you sort of import other players' prisons and try to escape from their prisons. That's fun as well. Trying to see how well your prison is set up compared to others. And this is an absolutely exceptional game. I believe it's only $29.99 on Steam, and it usually goes on sale whenever there's a summer sale or a winter sale. So I would definitely grab it when you have a chance, because you're going to get hours of fun out of this game. It's just absolutely great. Number 43 is Blitzkrieg 2. Now it's funny, when I bought this game back when I was 8 or 9 years old, I had no idea how to say Blitzkrieg or even what it meant. So whenever I used to write my notebook saying that I played this game, I would refer to it as the Setup Tanks game, and you'll understand why in a few minutes. So thinking about it, Blitzkrieg 2 really was my first true real-time strategy game. I hadn't really ever played an RTS game similar to Blitzkrieg before Blitzkrieg 2, and I absolutely loved it. One of the things I really liked about Blitzkrieg 2 was this sort of choosable reinforcement system that they had. At the time, I didn't know that basically all RTS games have a similar system set up, but at the time I was like, wow, this game lets me choose what units I want to call in at whatever time I want them at. So it lets you choose between infantry, standard infantry, assault infantry, AT infantry, tanks, light, medium, heavy tanks, tank destroyers, SPGs, light artillery, heavy artillery, bombers, fighters, ground attack planes, the quote-unquote super weapon for each faction. So like, say for example, Germany had the V2 rocket. You can just call in a V2 and wipe out a third of the map. Now, Blitzkrieg 2 was a real-time strategy game, but back when I was, say, 9 years old, I didn't really have much strategy when I played the game. Basically, I avoided any mission that didn't have some sort of bomber or tank call-in, because if I had to just use infantry, I would absolutely suck. I would never beat the mission. I used to just charge my infantry through mortar fire and minefields and machine gun fire, and then wonder why they all died almost instantly. So the only way I could beat a mission was by using either bomber spam or tank spam. Now for each mission, they give you a certain amount of reinforcements that you can call in. Normal missions, usually about 6 or 7 call-ins per mission. And after 4 or 5 missions, there'll be a really long mission where they'll give you, 4 or 5 times as many reinforcements, so you could call in 40 different units if you needed them. And I really like those types of missions because there was a flaw with their reinforcement system where you could just sit and spawn and just call in reinforcements over and over and over again. The AI wouldn't attack you, it would just defend when you attack them. So all of the AI enemy units would just sort of sit in their positions guarding different capture points or buildings or anything like that. And they would just wait for you to attack them. So you could just sit and spawn and just rack up all of your reinforcements all at once and then just do a big charge at once. I used to do that a lot. Basically my strategy was just amass as many heavy tanks as possible and then just charge them in all at once. Don't even care about AT guns, mines, anything. Just charge them in. Some of them will get through and we'll either destroy the building that we need to destroy or capture the point that I need to capture. So I'll just sit and spawn for, 10 minutes, and there was a speed up feature where you could hit the numpad plus button on your keyboard and you could speed up time. So you could just sit and spawn, hit numpad plus to speed up the game, and then just call in all of your reinforcements just right after another. And so I would just sit there, rack up 45 Kunix Tigers, and then when they're all ready to go, just send them in all at once. Basically, you can imagine how well that strategy worked out. I did beat most of the missions that way, just simply because there were so many heavy tanks. But usually what would end up happening was that they would end up getting into some sort of choke point, like a valley or say a bridge, and they would have to go single file. And since I had 45 tanks back to back in just a huge tank column, all the tanks would just get picked off one by one until they crossed the bridge or the valley. So even though I did have 50 tanks I'm sending in all at once, only like 15 of them would get through, and then those 15 would end up being the mission, simply because they're heavy tanks that can withstand a lot of hits. But so few of them would actually make it to the objective. It was hilarious. If the tank spam strategy didn't work, or if tanks weren't available on that mission, I would use heavy artillery. Basically, I would just sit and spawn, build 55 artillery guns, and just bomb the heck out of the objective area, just level the entire map. And then just send in, one light tank, and it can go capture the point because there are no enemies left. Everything just craters everywhere. But yeah, so I had no strategy in that game. It was either just heavy tank spam or artillery spam. And if those two reinforcements weren't available, I would try to use bombers sometimes, but usually the AI would have some sort of AA gun set up, so it would shoot down the bombers before they got to the objective. But if that didn't work, then I would just give up on the mission. I wouldn't even bother trying it because I didn't know how to do any sort of infantry strategy. But yeah, Blitzkrieg 2 is one of my absolute favorite classics. The graphics have aged quite a bit compared to another similar game that I'm going to mention later on in this list. It does look a lot worse than that game, but it's still one of my first real-time strategy games I've ever played, and still one of my favorites. Number 42 is the Oregon Trail 5. Now this is another really old management game. I believe it came out in 1999 or 2000, the 5th edition. So whenever we used to go to the library, I would spend an hour playing the Oregon Trail 5 on their computers because it was one of the only games that weren't directly educational. Like, it wasn't just a math game or a word game. It was actually sort of a fun adventure game that taught you things along the way. Now basically the point of this game is to get from Montgomery, Alabama to Oregon using the Oregon Trail. And it was really fun because you got to set up your wagon train, buy all of your supplies individually, buy all of your horses and your oxen, buy your firearms, go to the blacksmith, buy your anvils and your metal supplies there, go to the general store, buy all of your food and your salt and stuff there. And then once you're set up with all of your supplies, then you head out on the trail. And once you're on the trail, there are a lot of events just constantly happening. You probably know a lot of the common ones, like someone got dysentery or salmonella. You know, one of your axles broke on your wagon, so you'd have to stop and fix that from your supply cache. The most horrifying thing in that game was fording rivers, because you had absolutely no idea if some of the RNG gods were in your favor, and if you'd actually cross the river, or get stuck halfway in between. And then you'd have to either lose a horse, lose an oxen, or just lose your entire wagon with all of your supplies in it, or if you would actually make it across. The cutscenes were really well made, so you couldn't tell right off the beginning. And I always ran out of food along the trail because I never bought enough food at the general store. So I would just constantly be collecting plants, recording their species and stuff in a diary. They give you a little diary that you can write in. And I would spend, no joke, like 30 minutes writing diary entries in that game. Even though you lose your entries at the end of the game, I would still spend, 30 minutes an hour just writing diary entries about all the different plants I found, about how I'm upset that I just lost my wagon in a river a few miles back. So it was really fun. You got to hunt if you need to. If you actually ran out of food, you could go hunting, hunt some buffalo, hunt some ducks. I was never good enough to actually do that. I would always miss every single buffalo or deer that walked by, so I would never actually come back with any meat. But but it made me feel like, I'm helping my wagon train out. It has a really hard time running on Windows 7 or Windows 10, so I haven't played it in probably 13 years at this point. I just installed a virtual machine though a few weeks ago, and I actually installed it on that, and it worked just fine. It took some hacks to get it to work, but I finally got it to work, and I still mouthed along with every single cutscene I played because I've played this game for so long at this point. But it is a kid's game, and it's quite an old game, but if you get a chance to play it, I would still recommend trying it out if you have a chance. It's pretty fun. And lastly for this video, number 41, Battlefield 1942. So, Battlefield 1940 is actually my second Battlefield game of all time, after Battlefield 2 that I mentioned earlier. I actually bought Battlefield 1942 because of Battlefield 2. I enjoyed Battlefield 2 quite a lot, so I was like, hey, let me try this older version, 1942. And I liked it a lot more than Battlefield 2, to be honest. And part of that enjoyment came from knowing some of the weapons and vehicles from Blitzkrieg 2, just 2 games back. I recognized, say, the Sherman and the Tiger, so I was like, hey, I'm gonna use these vehicles in Battlefield 1942. It has to be one of my top 5 most played games of all time. Like, I have several thousand hours into this game just playing with bots. Like, no joke, I probably have 400, 500, 600 individual level recordings on my MP3 player. Like, I used to record just me playing different levels in Battlefield 1942. I have hundreds of them, all of them probably 10-15 minutes long. So I've played this game for quite a long time. After the first 1,000 hours, I used to try to do trick shots with planes and stuff like that. I'm sure you can still look them up on YouTube, like loop zoop montages, loop snipe montages, where you get a fighter plane, you drive off, say, the end of a cliff or over a bridge, and then you pull up your plane like nose up into the air. So you do sort of a loop-de-loop in the air. But just as your plane's climbing up, you jump out of the plane, pull out your bazooka or your sniper rifle, whatever you're trying to do, get a random shot on, say, a tank below you or an enemy running by on the bridge, and then snipe him or shoot him with the bazooka. And then as your plane's coming back around, completing the loop-de-loop, you fall back on top of the plane and get back in it. So you just, sniped or shot a tank with a bazooka in midair and then just kept flying. That was always fun when you pulled that off. Because it was quite tricky to do. You have to time it exactly right. But the medic kit in that game is so overpowered because you have a really good weapon, either a Thompson or an MP40. Really good for close range, and then you also have your medic pack where you can heal yourself. So you're basically just an immortal player just running around killing all the bots because they all take a few seconds to respond. They're not the smartest bots out there. So you could just, kill half the enemy team and then just heal up and then just wait for them to spawn again and just spawn camp them as they're running to a vehicle or running to a flag or anything like that. You could get, 5, 6, 7 kills just in a row over and over. It was just hilarious. You could rack up 200 kills in one match. But I also love the tank gameplay in that game. Tanks weren't extremely broken like they are in some games where they're just impossible to kill. These tanks actually died after 2 or 3 hits with a rocket. So you die pretty easily from those rockets, but what you do at that point is just spawn as an engineer if you're planning on driving a tank or an artillery piece. Just spawn as an engineer with your repair tool out, hop in the vehicle, drive around, get some kills, and then when your vehicle's low on health, just pull behind a little hill or a tree, jump out, you already have your repair tool in hand, just repair really quickly and hop back in, and then just keep going after 15 seconds or so. And you could just camp the enemy team with your Sherman tank or your priest or whatever you want to do. It was really fun. Absolutely love the Omaha Beach level in this game. You could just sit on one of the bunkers and just snipe the entire enemy team over and over. And they would have such a hard time hitting you because, again, they're not the most accurate bots. So you could just sit there for just forever and just keep sniping them over and over again. You would have to keep calling teammates to bring you ammo because you always run out. But for me at least, Battlefield 1942 is an absolute classic. One of my most played games of all time. It has to be in my top 5 at least. And it was absolutely great. I never played it online. I just played with bots, but it was still really fun and enjoyable. Yeah, so that was the first 10 games in my top 50 favorite games list. Next time, games 40 through 31. I hope you stop by to check it out. Have a good one.